Chapter 1 The Fight. A gust of sea wind shook a brown mess of girls on a boy of about 12. He was perched up on the ruins of an old stone arch, looking down upon a busybody alley below. Life couldn't be simpler as he chomped the last bite off an apple core and dipped his big toe into a warm ray of colored light. It was a sunbeam, shooting off the stained-glass tower of the Church of St. Jacques at the alleyway's end there in the seaport village of Dieppe in France. Bong! Ding! The boy watched from above as the church bells summoned a crowd into the alley. Back and forth, passerby and meddlers clogged up the street as they huddled from this corner to that. Bing! Dong! Doors slammed, and shopkeepers and tenants barked out from one floor to the other as the belfry tower rang its call. Bong! Dong! Until finally the gossip was complete, and every ear had twitched at some news. Captain General Jean Ribault, a sea-battled hero, had just made port, and at any moment he'd be making his way through the alley. "Hey, Marcel!" The voice was as labored as gravel sputtering beneath the wheel. It belonged to a hooded rogue leaned up against the base of the arch with a shifty-looking grin. His face was shadowed in stubble, and his leather garments were cracked and in desperate need of oil. Moss and fauna sprinkled him in a camouflage that seemed to grow from the very folds of his clothes. One look at the man's bow and arrows, not to mention a whiff of his pungent odor, and anybody could tell what he was, a knight of the road. He jangled a purse hidden up his arm sleeve and slipped out a coin. "Feast your eyes on this." He pitched it up to the youth perched up on the arch. Marcel caught the shining silver and gave the coin a gander. Its face caught the light and glimmered with the image of Charles IX, the boy king of France. Marcel flipped the coin over and brushed the etching of the year with his thumb. Its mark was 1562. It was a brand new coin. The boy clenched the silver into a white-knuckled fist. "This just about covers what you cheated me from, Bayard." Bayard, the hooded rogue, twiddled with the old leather strap of his bow. "Now, Marcel, I won that shooting contest fair and square." The boy flushed as red as a hot coal. "My arrow hit the bullseye, and you know it." "It's not my fault your arrow looked so alike to mine. Even the judge couldn't tell." "Judge? He was a thug, a knight of the road, same as you." "Look, boy, I came over here to scratch your back. Only for me to turn around and scratch yours, right? I know how this goes, Bayard. Well, if you're not paying up, I don't want your money, whatever it's for. Here, keep it." Marcel made ready to chuck the coin back down to the hooded rogue. "Now just hold it right there," said Bayard. "That's easy money you got there in your hand. Don't go throwing it away just because you don't like my face." "So what do I got to do?" Bayard grated the calluses of his hand against the prickly stubble on his chin. "Oh, just stir up a little trouble is all." "Why don't you just stir it up yourself?" "Because for a grown man like me, a little trouble might mean a scuffle with the guards, a night in the stocks, or worse. But a boy making a nuisance of himself, well, nobody will think twice about that." Marcel tossed the coin into the air and caught it. There was a new mischievous twinkle in his eyes. He said, "If you're looking for pranks, you came to the right kid." "Good. Now here's what I want you to do. When the captain comes riding through the alley—" "Captain Ribault?" "Of course I mean Captain Ribault. Who else? Now listen. I want you to give him a real proper greeting." The scoundrel paused. "If you know what I mean. Something to make sure he knows he's not welcome here in Dieppe anymore. So whatever you say it loud and clear. Then I want you to give the captain's horse enough of a good scare that it'll buck him clean off his saddle. And when Ribault hits the ground, well, no one will be able to say we ever harmed a hair on his head. At least, not by our own two hands, anyway." Marcel caught a lungful of sea breeze and sighed it all out. "Guess you came to the wrong kid after all, Bayard. Can't help you." "Can't? Or won't?" "Won't, since you can't take a hint." "What, you scared of getting caught or something?" "No, I just don't want to help you rough up a hero." "You mean heretic?" "No, I mean hero. Just because he happens to be a Huguenot doesn't make him a heretic." "All Huguenots are heretics, my boy." "A dangerous sect of Protestants, those ones. They don't even pray to the saints, you know. They don't even go to Mass." Never seen you at Mass yourself, Bayard. In fact, I can't remember ever seeing you pray before at all. The rogue jerked open his collar and yanked out a pendant. Its metal jutted dull and discolored in the breeze. It was the symbol of a buck with a cross between the antlers, the sign of the patron saint of all hunters. St. Hubert hangs from my neck, same as you, my boy. Only difference is yours is a little shinier than mine. And if you won't help, another boy will. So either way, the thing gets done and somebody gets paid. So you want in or not? The boy refused to answer. Instead, he held out his hand and slowly tilted his palm as the coin began to slide off. I'll tell you what, said Bayard. I bet you could knock the feather from Ribault's cap with what's left of that apple core you got there. That'll be all I'll ask. Your part will be done and the coin yours to keep. What do you say to that? The boy's fuzzy brown eyebrows scowled down at the rogue. I think there's nothing stopping me from telling the guards everything you just told me. The creases of Bayard's smile vanished. And I think there's nothing stopping me and my men from dragging you back to the forest where you belong. I'll never be one of your knights of the road, Bayard. Already made up my mind about that. It's what your father would have wanted. I know you don't remember him, but he was our best archer, and he was my friend. And before he died, I gave him my word I'd look out for his wee son, raise him right in the ways of the woods, teach him how to hunt, how to shoot, how to cheat and how to steal, you mean? Bayard stammered. I offered you a place you could call home, took you under my wing, only for you to turn your back and run off. But it's no secret where you live now, my boy, and who it is that's taken you in. Don't ever forget that. Should you cross me, Marcel, don't ever forget. I know where you live. You don't scare me one bit, Bayard, but you know, I don't think I'm going to tell the guards about our little talk after all. No? No. I'm not going to tell them for the same reason you're never going to take me back to the woods. Both would be a waste of our time. How's that? For one, there's no jail cell that can hold you for long, and two, there's no place in the world I'll ever call home, because I'm growing up to be my own man, with nothing or nobody to tie me down. You might think that's what you want, said Bayard, but I know what it is that you really want. The boy narrowed the gaze of his honey-brown eyes. What you want is a family, said Bayard, to be someone's son. That's what you want. And that's all you will want. Marcel stiffened his back and puffed up his chest. It was his best attempt to resemble a grown man. Well, as much as a 12-year-old could, anyway. You got it all wrong, Bayard. I just want to be a man. That's... A curl drooped, twitching his button nose. Irritated, the boy ran his fingers through the brown mess of hair. That's all I want. Have it your way, Marcel. Or have it both. Like how you could have had both with me. We could have been a family, you and I could have taught you how to be a man. But I'll tell you this, though. You'll never find what you're looking for among those Huguenots you live with now. If anything of your father is still left in this world, it's that you're a good Roman Catholic, same as me, same as he. Me and my men are waiting for the day you remember that. Marcel tugged on the weight of his own pendant of St. Hubert, tied to a bit of leather cord around his neck. What makes you think I ever forgot? Just because I got friends who believe in the new faith doesn't make me any less of a Catholic. I don't know, Marcel. Bayard pointed up at the silver coin in the boy's hand. What you hold right there is an opportunity to prove where your true loyalty lies. So far, all I've seen you do is stand up for heresy. It's not heresy, Bayard, to believe Captain Ribault was the greatest sailor in the history of France. Which he is, by the way. Marcel peered down at the coin's royal face in his hand. And I don't think King Charles would take too kindly to you using his own image as a bribe, especially against his best captain. Ah, but there are two sides to every coin, Marcel. Even our boy King knows when to throw a bone to the Huguenots and when to look the other way. And today, he's not looking anywhere near Dieppe. Now you're just talking in riddles, Bayard. See this crowd here in the alley? Marcel bounced his gaze from head to head. Oui. There was Friar Albert in brown robes, Guillaume the altar boy out of uniform, and a good many other peasants and nobles he knew well from Sunday Mass. Then there were other faces in the crowd, the followers of the new faith. They were but a few of the French Protestants led by Jean Calvin, who the rest of the world knew as John Calvin, and there in France his followers were known as the Huguenots. The boy shrugged. So what? So they might stand among each other right now, said Bayard, but something brews in Paris, my boy, and makes its way here. When it does, it'll be this side of the street against that, an all-out civil war, a religious war between Catholic and Protestant. And me and the other knights of the road have to wonder, when war reaches Dieppe, whose side will Marcel be on? Before the boy could answer, a string of shouts made its way down the alley. Make way! Make way for Captain Ribault, the Admiral's man! The crowd pushed back to the walls, up against the windows, and into the door frames. Bayard held out his hand, with one foot still facing the boy and the other ready to sneak off. Well? Marcel balanced the corner on his thumb and gave it a good flick. Ping! The silver piece fell to the cobblestones with a flop and a roll, then picked up speed faster than a flea could jump. Bayard gave the coin a hefty stomp as it zipped by, and just as quickly snatched it back into his purse. You can turn down my French silver today, Marcel, but you might find you just turned your back on some real money tomorrow. The boy raised an eyebrow. Sweet yellow gold, Marcel. Bayard's shifty-looking grin returned. Sweet yellow Spanish gold. And he disappeared into the crowd along the church walls of St. Jacques. Spanish gold? Marcel shook his head, unsure if he even believed the scoundrel, and turned instead to the commotion coming down the alley. Two riders drew near. One was a cadet, not much older than Marcel, and in the armor of men. He carried a battle flag bearing the Admiral's crest, and his breastplate caught midday's light in all its splendor. His ruddy face and tawny hair peeked out from under a loose helmet, which still needed some growing into, but was well stuffed to keep its place. Even so, Marcel found himself slightly envious. Not only did the other boy get to wear shining armor, but he had enough skill to ride a horse and hold up a battle flag at the same time, too. The other rider was a man, about 40 in years. A sword clanked at his waist, and he bobbed up and down in the saddle with a big feather in his cap. A great red beard sprung up beneath a pair of sun-spotted cheeks, and Marcel knew it could be no other but Captain General Jean Ribault himself. A hush came over the crowd as the pair rode by. As their mounts reached the old ruined arch, the captain swapped a glance and a nod with the boy up top. In the instant, Marcel discovered no fabled hero, but a man, with a strange sadness hidden beneath blue eyes. The boy had seen this sadness before. It wasn't a worn-out sad, or even really a lonely one, but more like a weight being carried inside. Whatever the captain's burden was, the boy bet the sword knew the answer. If only swords could talk. Ah, the tales they'd tell. A voice split the quiet of the crowd. Heretic! The crowd murmured to themselves. The young cadet tensed a little in his saddle, but the captain carried on through the alley without so much as looking sideways. Heretic! There it was again. Heretic! The throng of onlookers mumbled a little louder. Marcel knew who the voice belonged to. It was Guillaume, the altar boy from St. Jacques. His hateful echoes bounced from this end of the alley to that. Heretic! Until it was no longer just his voice, but other boys as well. Heretic! Heretic! Guillaume and two others pushed their way through the ranks of the crowd and charged the alley. The jeering boys circled about Ribault's steed and zigzagged their way around the cadet's horse. They ducked beneath the animals, then popped up and made ugly faces. They smacked their hind legs, startling the horses into a panic. All was made worse by a barrage of ammo, fired away from the slingshot and the blow-dart. Clink, plunk, ping! Nuts and slimy cabbage and bits of dried bread ricocheted off the pair's armor. Marcel boiled as he witnessed this harassment and all the foul grins that went with it. More upsetting was the crowd, who did absolutely nothing but exclaim and gossip as it all played out in front of them. They're just letting it happen. But the most upsetting of all was that Captain Ribault wasn't fighting back. He's just taking it. The young cadet, however, proved to be more spirited in the face of taunts from other boys his own age. His battle flag served as a sort of jousting lance as he chased after Guillaume the altar boy and warded off the other two. Clear out, you devils, or I'll give each of your skulls something to remember me by. Keep moving, cadet, said the captain. They're just kids. Leave 'em. Whoa! Whoa! Guillaume stood in front of Ribault's horse and pulled out a big, nasty grass snake from the ties of a cloth sack. Harmless but frightening, gray and green it wormed. He held the cold-blooded creature right up beneath the animal's snorts as it pulled back to get away. The horse finally squealed and stood up on its back 2 legs. With a jerk and a thud of hooves, the captain managed to regain control. Guillaume narrowly avoided getting stomped to death, only to return holding the serpent by the tail as its slithering head inched closer and closer to the eyes of Ribault's steed. The horse fluttered its hooves in terror as foam began to drizzle from its mouth. Again, the horse stood back on its hind legs, higher and higher, as Ribault lost his grip. At last he fell from his saddle. The weight of his body and armor crashed into the cobblestones, as loud as every pot and pan and dish falling to a kitchen floor. That was it. Marcel couldn't take any more. He climbed down from his perch atop the old ruined arch, red as a rooster's crest as his bare feet hit the street. Guillaume and his friends howled out with glee. They replayed the captain's plight, mocking how he fell as Guillaume pretended to be knocked down from an imaginary horse, while the other 2 hissed like snakes. With Ribault down, the 3 boys then turned their attention to the cadet and his horse. "Back off! I'm warning you!" The cadet attacked with little use as the boys dodged the broad, slow swipes of his battle flag. One little villain grabbed hold of the harness, held the beast steady as the other grappled onto the mounted youth and pulled him off the saddle. And there in the grime of the alley, the 3 boys pinned the cadet down, sitting on his every limb as Guillaume played his helmet like a drum. "Hey, Guillaume!" It was Marcel. The ringleader turned, only to be met by a wallop of a kick to the chest. Guillaume went flying backward into the other 2 boys squatting on the cadet. They all toppled over one another, adding even more weight to the cadet's helpless state. "Oof!" "If this is your idea of helping," said the cadet, barely squeezing out the words through a wheeze. Marcel dug through the pile of boys, shoving them off to either side as he dodged their swinging fists and kicking heels. "Oh, just get up already and help me fight." They were on their own. Friar Albert had rushed to Captain Ribault's aid, and both men were too busy rounding up the horses that had run off into the crowd to pay any mind to a little war between 5 boys. "You're going to wish you stayed out of this one, Marcel." It was Guillaume. The other 2 boys seized Marcel by the shoulders and twined their legs around each of his. He was stuck. Marcel tried to shake them off, but it was too late. With nowhere to escape, his face got a mouthful of knuckles from Guillaume. Whap! Just as Marcel was about to suffer another blow, "Hey!" It was the cadet, back on his feet. He caught hold of Guillaume's right arm, stopping the punch, only for the menace to spin around and give the cadet's eye a pounding from his left. Bop! The cadet bumbled back and collided with another boy. That boy pushed the armored youth back into Guillaume, but this time the cadet fared better, as the brim of his helmet met the brow of the rabble-rouser. Guillaume cowered, a bright red welt above his eyes. He attempted to retreat, but his belly got caught on an elbow jab from Marcel. Oomph! Guillaume leaned over in pain, which made it all too easy for Marcel to roll him forward with a hearty push to the back. Guillaume toppled face first into a shallow ditch that ran alongside the alley. It was a brown, sticky trickle. It could have been more than half a foot deep, but it was full of muddy, questionable water, and who knew what else. As Marcel stood there proud, arms crossed with a big bloody grin, one of the other boys tackled him from behind. Marcel and his opponent barreled toward the shallow ditch, each wrestling to lob the other's face into the muck with Guillaume. The ruts of the cobblestone made way for a jagged arena, nicking Marcel's chin, scraping up the other boy's elbow, and busting up each of their knuckles as they squirmed and writhed along in their match. Some of the older men in the crowd began placing bets, as younger men took it upon themselves to coach from the sidelines. Women and children shook their heads and laughed at the lively display of the 5 rough-and-tumble boys. They cheered as the cadet locked his opponent's head in his arm and rubbed his fist wildly on the helpless boy's head. Others rooted for Guillaume as he pushed himself up out of the filth and crawled over to the wrestling pair of Marcel and the other boy. Just as Guillaume was about to grab hold of Marcel's ankle with a very stinky and brownish slime-covered hand, the cadet came to the rescue. The armored youth swung his headlocked opponent round and round, who was punching and wiggling to no avail, and let him loose toward Guillaume, knocking both boys into the shallow ditch. Guillaume returned to the mire, face first once again. The other boy skidded into the sludge with such a nasty curdled splash, every inch of him was sprinkled with bits of brown. Finally, the cadet stooped over and broke up the locked horns of the wrestling match. He peeled off Marcel's adversary and wrangled the enemy to his feet. Marcel gripped his opponent by the back of his head and pushed him into a running start. The boy stumbled and tripped with the momentum, landing right on top of the other two devils in the ditch. The three rabble-rousers scrambled up and decided enough was enough, and they fled the alley without so much as looking back. The crowd gave them plenty of room, too, as they made their escape, as none wished to brush shoulders with such a filthy, stinking trio. And just when the two young victors thought it was all over, "You're gonna pay for this, Marcel," it was Bayard. The hooded rogue jerked Marcel back by the shirt collar. And who knew what he would have done to the boy next, but Bayard never got the chance, as the tip of Ribault's blade met the stubble of his cheek. "Release him," said the captain, with his shimmering sword held forth. Bayard took a look around at the watchful eyes of the crowd. None were too eager to take his side against the captain. The hooded rogue clenched his teeth in a weak grin and let loose his grip on the boy's shirt. "Meant him no harm, Captain. Just wanted to teach the rascal a little lesson. Boys shouldn't be fighting in the street, you know." "You his father?" "No," said Bayard. Ribault furrowed his bushy red brow. "Then step back." Bayard plodded off, scowling as he disappeared into the faces of the crowd. Ribault sheathed his sword and turned his attention to Marcel. "Come on. Probably best if we get you a ride home." "I'm not afraid to walk home, Captain." "And I believe it," said Ribault. "But there might be vengeance afoot, and why take the gamble?" Marcel nodded. "Merci, Captain." He agreed, not because getting escorted home seemed wise, but because the chance to ride a horse proved irresistible, even if he did have to ride double. Friar Albert waddled over with the reins of both horses in hand. He passed off one to the captain and the other to the cadet, and the pair mounted up. The youth extended a hand down to Marcel and helped him clamber up to the back of the saddle. "I hope you can forgive our village, Captain," said the friar. "I'd hate for any of this to leave you with a bitter taste for us here in Dieppe. We're not all so ill-willed, I assure you. I, for one, am at your service, no matter what religion you believe." "It's the same religion as yours, friar," said Captain Ribault. "Cut from the same cloth. If I were to tear up the great banner of France into pieces and hand them out, yours might have a lot more golden thread, mine a little more satin blue. But that wouldn't make them any different. They'd still just be pieces, waiting to be the same whole." "Well spoken, Captain," and the friar bowed out. "Merci." Ribault circled his horse round to the cadet, where Marcel held on at the back of the saddle. "Where do you live, boy?" "The Laudonnier house," said Marcel. "On the old road to Le Havre. It's not far." "That's funny," said Captain Ribault. Marcel and the cadet exchanged a confused look in the saddle. "What's so funny about that, Captain?" "Well," Ribault stroked his great red beard, "it's funny 'cause it just so happens that's where I'm headed, too."